Good morning and welcome to Off the Record, where we bring you alternative news, not alternative facts.
Today on the show, we're going to have a look at the climate strike that happened in Melbourne this week. We're also going to cover the festival music regulations and how they're affecting Victoria, and the Census Date, how it impacts students. My name's Ashley Dryhurst.
And I'm Sophie Evans. Thank you so much for joining us on our first episode of the show. Whether you're watching via Facebook or online via YouTube, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Off the Record LT.
Perfect. How great was that intro?
Pretty good, I reckon.
Pretty good.
I also want to say a huge thank you to Vanessa for drawing our opening credits logo. It looks amazing.
Cool.
Yeah.
Heading to the news?
Yep, let's start off with what's making news this week. New Zealand has announced a ban on semi-automatic and assault rifles following the Christchurch terror attack. This also comes after a ban on the suspect's manifesto. The One Nation Party is in the spotlight again. A recent investigation by Al Jazeera showed One Nation officials lobbying to pro-gun groups. The officials were shown to be asking for political donations from the gun groups while discussing potentially weakening Australia's strict gun laws. In America, a federal investigation by Robert Mueller has found no evidence of the Trump campaign conspiring with Russia. This comes after months of outcry from Democrats and supporters. This surely gives the Trump administration a boost moving into 2019. And to all you Android users out there, you might be able to ditch your Mikey and use your phone instead of following a proposal to use Google Pay for public transport. Transactions. Unfortunately, iPhone users will have to wait for now. The government plans to seal a deal with Apple to use its Apple Pay system. But it's not all bad news for Apple fans. The tech giant has announced an Apple credit card promising no fees, low interest and better rewards. That's all we have for news this week.
Yeah, thanks, Sophie. It's really interesting about the Apple Pay system, how they're kind of like behind the track.
Yeah, it's quite a difference. And I know that difference between Android operating systems and Apple users is going to cause a bit of an outcry, I reckon. Yeah,
because like the accessibility is kind of what makes Apple really important. You know, like it makes everything easier, but they're a step behind. It's a bit of a blow to the brand.
Well, I hope the government and Apple have a discussion soon, because that would make things a whole lot better.
Yeah, and that Pauline Hanson thing, I think it's just like kind of like another nail in the coffin in the situation. I'm not a huge fan of Pauline Hanson, and I think it's a bit unfair for all this sort of stuff to happen, especially what happened in Christchurch in New Zealand. It's a bit of a shame.
And in Australia, we're known for our strict gun laws.
Yeah.
Quite well known, actually.
Yeah.
So I can't personally see that changing in the future. I think we should keep it that way.
Perfect. Cool. Well, last week, students around Victoria gathered in Melbourne to protest climate change. Sophie here was at the protest talk to talk to the students.
On the steps of the old Treasury building, school children come from all over Melbourne to strike for their future, a future threatened by climate change, and they have one thing on their minds. One of the speakers at today's march was Annika Renner, who outlined the demands for the movement and had a personal message for the government.
Scott Morrison and any of the federal government, whoever that may be at the next election, needs to have an acceptable climate policy. The school strike movement has 3 demands. 1, stop Adani. 2, no new coal or gas projects in Australia. And 3, 100% renewable energy by 2030.
Many creative signs were held up high as they marched through the streets, their voices echoing through the CBD. The march was just one of 65 locations in Australia striking. 50,000 students striked in Melbourne alone. The number is certainly impressive, and for another leader of the movement, Maisha, a little overwhelming.
It's incredible. It's overwhelming. I've never thought that this tiny movement, it's a grassroots movement, would expand into this massive global strike. Over 100 countries striking with us. That's unprecedented, firstly. And secondly, it just drives our message home. So I'm very proud of today.
For those who still want to get involved, there are plenty of ways to do so.
First of all, if you're a student, we would encourage you to help us organise, whether that's coming to our meetings. We have a post-climate strike meeting later in the year, so coming along and seeing how you can help out. If you're a parent, spreading the message, coming along to the strikes with little kids and with your own kids, talking about it. If you're another adult, just part of the general public, really just promoting our message and standing in solidarity with us.
And as for those who think they should be in school right now,
one day of school will not be remembered, but this strike will be remembered by many people here for the rest of their lives.
this is Sophie Evans, Off the Record.
Oh, that's incredible. But what do we do from now? Like the protest is over. How can we take action even though the event is over?
Well, I believe they're actually planning another kickstart tour across Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane, I think, just to sort of like still keep everybody's voices high up and to really show the political parties that they mean business before the federal election rolls around.
Yeah. Do you think it's an important focus when it comes to the election?
Absolutely, because students are a large portion that the government represents, and they are essentially our future, so they'd be a very important group of people to represent and make sure their voices are heard.
Yeah, because they will be voting within the next few years, all the people at school. So it's kind of good to have an idea that these people are really interested in our environment and taking it further.
Yeah, it was really inspiring. Now on to our next story. Last month, the New South Wales government introduced new laws on music festivals. This has led to much outcry from the music industry. Cody Matson-Lowe talked to the members of the Victorian music industry just to see how much it affected them.
Get out your favourite Slayer shirt. This month, Music Festival Download came back to Melbourne for the second time. Recently, it hasn't been great for the Australian music scene. Last February, the New South Wales government announced new regulations enforcing festivals to pay for police. 3 festivals have already cancelled due to the cost. This has caused quite a stir in the music industry. But what about the Victorian music scene? Cranbourne band Future Static are in high hopes.
I think it's going to make the Melbourne scene flourish a little bit. People are going to come down to Melbourne to party, to see gigs, to have a good time, and that's going to sort of make it explode. So it's just a real shame that it has to happen under these circumstances.
Roadie Daniel Seagrave has noticed a growing trend around Victoria.
There's a lot less work going around in Sydney, so there's been a lot of dudes from Sydney moved down to Melbourne, and yeah, Sydney just seems like it's slowly starting to drop off.
But how will the regulations affect both Future Static and Daniel?
It's still important that we travel as much as we can and spread our music as much as we can, because we need to be able to eventually tour and eventually travel, and Sydney's a big enough city that, like, even with all of those regulations, if we can't perform there, then it's kind of a waste of a tour.
I feel like it could limit where I could go with my career. I of course want to get into the festival scene, be doing sound at these festivals. Like, there's a lot of good festivals going on in Victoria. You got your Beyond the Valley, you've got Groove in the Moo. Just be able to have festivals everywhere across Australia just like opens up so many possibilities of where I could go. I just feel like we should have as many music festivals going as we can, because it gives a nice little boost into the local economy around the areas. I've had a lot of mates from country towns hate it while it's happening, but they're so happy after it because the local towns just thrive.
A lot of international bands are then going to be less likely to come down here. Bands aren't going to want to pay the money to travel down here to not play all the cities.
The recent regulations are seemingly a response to calls for pill testing. But would pill testing be the better solution?
Drugs aren't really a thing to be taken sort of lightly. Anything that we can do to minimise that harm and minimise that risk, I think is a fantastic idea.
Trying to say, oh, it's going to encourage people to take drugs. It's not. People are doing them anyway. Might as well be safe about it.
You know, don't worry about the legal side of it. Worry about saving people's lives.
What should the Victorian bands do to help the New South Wales music scene?
Bands choosing to not go to Sydney and do that, that's not helping it. The bands need to go there and prove that there is a need for all ages venues and a need for places to be open later.
That's kind of how music scenes die. People try and muscle in on their territory. In this case, it's the government. You know, they try to stop people from having a good time, and so people just throw their hands up and say, yep, that's it. To just give up. It's kind of selfish in a way.
Daniel Seagrave agrees with the band.
I just feel like it'd be real sick to keep music going as far out as we can.
It seems the only thing falling in the Victorian music industry is this guy. Cody Matson-Lowe for Off the Record.
hence my face.
Very interesting indeed. Well, as long as the regulations keep everyone safe.
Yeah, well, I think music's important. And when it comes to talking about like age regulations as well as like regulations on alcohol and drugs, I know that my peak interest in music was young teen. So I think if regulations stop those sorts of like venues from existing, that I think it would have a really big hit on music within Australia completely, or even the whole industry within Australia. So it's a bit of a shame, but yeah. Moving on to sport, we have Jack Saparis talking about the basketball world. Hey, Jack.
Thanks, guys. How you going? So in the NBA, over in America, something pretty extraordinary happened. A very long playoff streak was broken. The best player in the NBA, LeBron James, ended his 14-year-long streak of making it to the the postseason.
So
playoffs.
The playoffs.
Yeah.
Kind of like finals.
Yeah, kind of struck. Imagine in the AFL you have the finals series, like you have it week to week, and then you have the grand final. In the NBA, it works a little bit differently. It's the playoffs, and then those teams face off against each other in 7-game series, and then 2 teams make it to the NBA finals. So he's spent the last 14 years of his career making it into the playoffs, and this year that was broken after the Los Angeles Lakers didn't make it.
Do you think the fans will be really disappointed by that?
Yeah, I think so. I think they really had high hopes because the best player in the NBA came to their team, and they were like, oh yeah, we're finally going to be in the playoffs, and then it just didn't happen. And that was due to a number of things. A lot of injuries to the younger players, injuries to LeBron. I think he missed about 17 games.
17 games in a whole season.
Ooh.
Yeah, so that really hampered them a little bit. So I think it's just a matter of getting back to next season.
So when
being hungrier
with the Lakers and having LeBron in, expecting a team to win just because of one player, what was there any other factors that they had an idea behind?
I think, thinking they were going to make the playoffs with just LeBron, it was pretty valid because last season he was with the Cleveland Cavaliers, and he took a very bad, shoddy team all the way to the NBA Finals. So I think people sort of expected that same sort of result from this Lakers team because they saw their team as better surrounding LeBron than last season. So, it just came as a bit of a shock, but there's nothing you can really do now. They just have to focus on next season.
Yeah. Is there any hope for next season?
There is. There are a couple of big free agents that are wanting to sign new contracts. So I think the Lakers are going to try and steal a couple of really good players for their team to sort of bolster their starting lineup.
Yeah, because half the team is quite new to the league.
Yeah. About 5 or 6 players are in their second and third year, and then the other half are veterans who've been in the league for 10 plus years.
Yeah, it seems almost like a bit of kind of like with the Essendon taking on new teammates, trying to build up there.
Yeah, definitely.
It doesn't seem like it would make it a good thing to have the older, more experienced players sort of carry the team along.
No, it's not, because in the league is very deep and chock full of talent, especially in the conference that they're in, like the part of the league they're in. They're just coming up against NBA superstar after NBA superstar, and they're just not able to hold a candle to them without LeBron. So
yeah, it's a bit hard having a trump card when everyone's considered a trump card these days.
Yeah.
Oh, well, awesome. Thanks, Jack.
No worries. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Now, Ashley, we're going to jump over to the Culture Corner, where each week you and Robert Dorigo will be covering all things pop culture.
Yeah, this week we tried out a game that could possibly be one of the hardest games I've played this year. Hey, welcome. My name's Ashley Athea Stryhurst.
I'm Rob Dorigo, and welcome to the Culture Corner.
Here on the Culture Corner, we'll be bringing you game reviews and pop culture news.
Pretty much, guys, it's just anything that's relevant, newsworthy, hot topics, new releases, controversies, anything that's important and relevant for you guys to know about.
Sweet. And with that, let's just jump into it. From Software is a Japanese games company best known for their Dark Souls series. The Dark Souls series, along with other releases by From Software such as Bloodborne, created a whole new genre known as the Souls series. The Dark Souls series was loved and hated by the hardcore gaming community due to its intense gameplay and its captivating storyline. From Software's new game, Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice is clearly cut from the same cloth, but doesn't live up to its predecessors.
The game takes place in a reimagined late 16th century Sengoku period Japan. In it, the player takes control of Shinobi, who was left for dead after his lord was kidnapped and his arm severed by a leading samurai of the Ashini clan. The Shinobi awakens to find that his missing arm has been replaced with a prosthetic by a mysterious Bushi, who dubs him Sekiru, or the One-Armed Wolf. Armed with the katana and the prosthetic, which allows for various tools and gadgets to be installed on it, he sets off to rescue his lord and get revenge.
Now, being one of the Souls-like game, there's definitely going to be some similarities between Dark Souls and Sekiro. Some of the main differences we've noticed: in Sekiro, there's no individual character creation. You follow the story of one main shinobi. This allows for a much greater in-depth storyline.
You are no longer given a variety of weapons. You now play with the same katana you have at the very beginning of the game. You then go through a skill tree to learn new moves or combat to try and improve your skills.
The combat in this game has been tackled in a slightly different way. Although it will seem difficult at first, your practice will be rewarded. Learn the mechanics and you'll be fine.
When you die, you have the option to revive yourself. However, it doesn't always seem the optimal choice to do this, as it could result in the game becoming harder.
Now, I'm personally a huge fan of the Souls series, playing the games many times in a row. So I was excited to pick up Sekiro when it first came out.
The focus on stealth in this game, you really had to strategize exactly the way you wanted to go about the combat. It wasn't just run in and slash with your sword, because that you'd just result in dying that way.
Because you weren't given this huge plethora of weapons, you had to take in account that certain skills out of the skill tree, you needed them to defeat certain bosses in the game. I am going to miss the fact that you won't have this large collection of weapons to use. I've played through the Souls games at least 20 times each, using different weapons every single time. So there is that disappointment,
yes,
that replayability that I'll be looking for. So far, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice is out on PC, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
We really appreciate all you guys viewing our content, and we do like to give you guys what you want. So if you'd like to contact us, please contact us on the link below and send us any funny videos that you might have from gaming or music or anything related that revolves around our show, or anything that you want us to talk about in the future. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Hi, so that game was extremely difficult, lots of fun though, and I can't wait to bring you guys more stuff next week.
And now, a recent study from Stanton Serum Institute has shown there is no link to autism from the measles vaccine. Vaccination is now a hot topic, with more parents choosing not to vaccinate their kids.
Joining us, we have Professor of the Public Health in La Trobe, Vijaya Sundarajan.
Hello.
How are you today?
I'm very well.
That's good, that's good. Now, can you explain what you do at the university?
Yeah, so I am new to the university. I'm new to La Trobe about less than a year. So I'm head of public health.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a health services researcher. And public health is quite a large department, and we do a lot of teaching, both undergraduate and postgraduate public health, rehab counseling, art therapy, health services management, ergonomic safety and health. We have a lot.
Sounds like a lot of work. Are you enjoying it, being a year in?
Yeah, I am. Wonderful, wonderful group of people.
Awesome. Now,
so what are the main takeaways from the study?
So what I'd like people to remember is that there's different kinds of study designs, and for this question, this is I would say the most powerful. So the study was based in Denmark, and what they did is used Denmark's wonderful, readily available data, where they have information on immunizations, they have a register for mental health, and they pulled all of that together to do a population-based study of enormous. So one of the ways we test a study like this, that's called a cohort study, is what level of population were they able to capture, and how long did they follow them up. They had more than 600,000 births that they followed up across time. More than 5 million person years. Like if they had taken, followed up more than 5 million people across time. And so this is a study that's with a well sort of established group. They've done a study before akin to this, separate but akin. So all the evidence to date has found no relationship between the vaccination, the MMR vaccine, and autism. One criticism of previous work has been that they weren't able to look at risks in people who were higher risk, like you might have a sibling, or other risk factors like late age of parentage, those kinds of things. In this study, they were able to do that subgroup analysis, and again, they found no relationship. So quite strong evidence. I would say enough evidence to not need to ever do this kind of study again.
Because what kind of started this movement?
So what started this? There was a study in 1998 or so that was published in quite a reputable journal, The Lancet, which purported to find a association between the vaccination and autism-type symptoms. And that study design was actually quite weak.
Yeah.
And even saying that, it has since been proven that there was sort of malfeasance, that in fact that the persons who conducted that study have been struck off the medical register in the UK. Now, the sad part of that is right about that time, measles cases were really going down. We were not quite ready to achieve control. But since then, with the increase in a reluctance to vaccinate, we've had much more outbreaks. In fact, there's one, just very timely. This morning, the news shows that there's a county in New York that has had so many measles cases that they've basically suggested that people who are not vaccinated should not be in public places.
Yeah, that's
quite a
came out
surprise.
today. Yeah. It's
quite a
crazy.
surprising thing. Yeah.
It's kind of insane how this sort of stuff spreads so quickly and then affects such large quantities of people. But
you mean the measles or the desire not to vaccinate?
The desire not to vaccinate.
You were saying something earlier, which I think is really quite important. The proportion who don't want to vaccinate, it's not that high. So if we look at Australia, we have vaccination rates in the mid to higher 90s for many things. And one of the things I was reading in preparation for this was pointing out that there's two reasons why you don't end up getting a vaccination. There are barriers that we can all work to decrease. And then there is a small proportion, about 2.5%, that really don't want to vaccinate. And studies have been done as to why that is. And there's been some connections to the use of alternative medicine or complementary medicine. But there's also a connection with the concern that parents do have about so many vaccinations being done in that case. And you're right, things like this receiving a lot of media and perhaps being blown out of proportion.
Yeah, I feel like people have more access to those strong groups. Although they're kind of small, because of social media, they have large connections. Like I pointed out earlier, the Flat Earth Society seems a lot bigger than it is just because people can see it.
I think that's a really good point. But the truth is that we have very high vaccination rates. For measles, the target is about 95%. Well, we have that in Victoria. We have higher than 95%, just above. So we're able to take advantage of something called herd immunity, where the interesting thing about vaccinations is it's beneficial to you as an individual, but it's also beneficial to society at large. And achieving that proportion vaccinated is really useful, because in terms of the biology of how measles infects and grows, that keeps it down.
And with today's options of a vaccine, how do you think a measles outbreak might still occur? Apparently there was one in the USA, Rockland County?
Yeah, it's been there. They've had more than 200 cases since the beginning of the year. They have pockets of groups that for various reasons don't want to vaccinate, for cultural, religious beliefs or otherwise. They don't. And then you have a group, just as you need a certain fraction in terms of having the herd immunity, you might imagine that if there's a group that's of a reasonable size and they don't vaccinate, that their vaccination rates are zero, not quite zero, but they're very low, that then sets up a situation. And so then those people, that's a reservoir in a sense, and then if they go out into the larger community, you can see what happens.
Yeah. No, it's kind of crazy how it all happens. It just throws you back. I know that a lot of people probably don't remember or even were alive during the period of time where polio was huge, and you have those huge areas of chambers. What were they called? The iron lungs or something like that, where they were head to toe in steel.
Horrific.
Yeah. It's kind of scary how you quickly forget about that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool. Now, it's always hard to kind of get comfortable with this with university, but unfortunately, not everyone can make it through their first semester. Luckily, we have the Census Date, which can make that sort of stuff a little bit more comfortable.
It's a new study year for university students across Australia. Some commencing their final years, whereas others are beginning their degrees.
I look a bit younger than I actually am, so at this stage of my life, I'm ready to just get on with it, really.
With HECS fees and Census Date, most university students have the luxury to try before they buy. There is no financial impact if they defer before Census Date. We asked the students of La Trobe about their thoughts on Census Date.
Yeah, I reckon it's really good knowing that you're not going to have to pay the money for something that you might not want to do.
In fact, research by the Australian Department of Education and Training showed that on average, around 6,000 Victorian applicants defer per year.
So I deferred my first year. Once I got accepted after year 12, I deferred for a year and had a gap year.
So how many other students are deferring their degrees?
It's sort of the thought pops into my mind every now and then. As soon as Census Date comes up, I'm like, oh, maybe I should defer because work's getting just a little bit stressful. But no, I never really do it.
I actually have. I did nursing last year and deferred and then decided to change courses.
While some may have not deferred, some of them have dropped and switched classes before Census Date.
I just didn't realise, the subject wasn't really what I thought it would be, and then I didn't really find it as interesting.
So, is the system of Census Date liked by all the students?
I do really like the idea of Census Date. It's like I said, it's super handy for getting a feel of that subject.
In my personal experience, it hasn't had much effect. It hasn't meant much to me personally.
Gives you a back door if you need to get out, and it's good.
Census Date is the 31st of March, so if there's that one annoying class you want to change, best do it now. Cody Matheson Lowe for Off the Record.
And if you're looking for something to do this weekend, our very own Lakshmi Ganapathy has got you covered. Each week, Lakshmi's going to join us with what's going on in Melbourne. What have you got this week?
So this week, we actually have the Melbourne International Flower and Garden Show, which is on from Wednesday to Sunday this week at the Royal Exhibition and Carlton Gardens. So that's actually back for its 24th year, which is the biggest horticultural event in the Southern Hemisphere. And yeah, really with something that big, there's something for everyone. So there's live music and pop-up wine bars at the Gardens of Twilight. So that's actually at nighttime. And then there's also flower design workshops, even free professional advice from accredited landscape builders if you're sort of looking for your next garden inspiration. That's really cool. And the main event actually is the show gardens. So that's the best Australian and international landscape designers that are on display in the Carlton Gardens for 5 whole days, the gardens that they've made. And all of those gardens are actually in the running for the Show Garden Design Award, which is really prestigious actually. It's like the Logies of landscaping. Yeah, so it's massive. It's really an all-day event. And so my top tip would be to plan ahead if you're going to go to this. There's so much on the website, so just plan what you're sort of going to go to before you attend. And obviously leave an entire day to see this because there's so much.
Yeah, sounds incredible. I'm probably going to check it out. I'm a huge herb gardener myself. I grow all my own herbs.
Yeah.
And I went last year and was absolutely amazed by how beautiful it is. Definitely going to try and come back this year.
Yeah, it's certainly something that needs to go on your Instagram, definitely.
Awesome. Well, that's all we have time for today. Thanks for joining us. Make sure that you follow us on our Twitter handle at Off the Record LT and on our Instagram as well. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
I'm Sophie Evans.
I'm Ashley Dryhouse.